digitaljamsessions.com. Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. Today we're joined by Oliver from Qwerty Films, Charlie from the Generation of Z, Jeff from Starlight Runner, and Sanj from Halcyon. We'll be looking at the nature of immersive entertainment through film and theatre. If we could start off with some introductions, I'm going to start with Oliver because you are almost a regular now, Oliver, on this show. So tell our lovely listeners who you are and what you do.
Well, my name's Oliver Castman. I'm the head of production and development at Qwerty Films, and that means that I'm responsible for working with Michael Kuhn and generating new projects for the company, feature film and television projects. And then weighing in on production issues when we've got one in production or in prep, as we do now. We're about to start shooting a feature with Stephen Frears, Meryl Streep and Hugh Grant that's a couple of weeks away from filming. So it's all hands to the pumps here at the moment.
And yet you managed to find time for us. I appreciate that, Oliver.
Of course.
Jeff, if you'd like to explain a little bit more about you and Starlight Runner, that would be wonderful.
Sure thing. I'm Jeff Gomez. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Starlight Runner Entertainment. We're a production company that's based in New York City, and we specialize at taking intellectual property and developing it so that it operates in different and unique ways across different media platforms. We're known best for our Hollywood work. So a studio will approach us with a screenplay for a big blockbuster movie, and they want the property to the potential of the property to be maximized. They're investing a lot of money in the movie, but they need for the intellectual property to kind of last for years and years. And we help them to develop the story worlds so that they play well as video games or comic books or novels or prequels or sequels and things like that. Transmedia storytelling is what it's called, and this technique is proliferating across the entertainment industry, advertising, even in the corporate world, branding, business education, and things like that.
Wonderful. And Sanj, would you like to explain a little bit more about you and Halcyon? Did I get it right this time?
Yeah, you did. My name's Sanj. I'm the experiential producer at Halcyon. We're basically a digital creative design studio that specializes in new technology. We basically craft like digital experiences for a growing network of pioneering digital luxury organizations. And some of our clients include Richemont, LVMH, the Swatch Group, Kering Group, and across emerging digital fashion and retail sectors. We've deployed digital installations all over the world, including places like Tokyo, China, the US, and various places around Europe. My background, I originally worked within the music industry, developing an understanding of e-commerce and social trends within the web back in the late 90s. And from there, I helped digital startups target music industry professionals during the seismic shift of consumer habit evolution from physical product to digital. My kind of speciality within Halcyon is to basically work with the tech team and the design team to develop new live digital experiences for the purpose of product launches and experiential events.
Wonderful. Okay. We may have a fourth person trying to join us, but Skype is not playing ball with me today, so we'll continue onwards on the assumption that it's a no for now, but we may be joined later by Charlie. But in the meantime, what I wanted to talk about today was very much around transmedia entertainment and this notion that we, kind of 5 years maybe, or even 10 years ago, this was still very, very much exploratory, and people didn't really understand too much about what we were getting into. And I actually recall some conversations with Starlight Runner, back in the day, Jagex, and there really was a complete lack of understanding around what the benefits were of transmedia and what the full scope and potential of things like ARG really were. But I think we're now moving into kind of a golden age, if you like, for digital storytelling and transmedia storytelling, and kind of using this notion of not just multiple device but multiple formats. And we're beginning to see the emergence of things like immersive theatre experiences with people like the Heist, or Alice's Underground Adventures, or Generation of Z, where we have these live theatre experiences that are very immersive and very require audience participation. And we begin to see that reflection not just in the physical sense but also in the digital sense. So I'm curious about where we think the future of transmedia is really going, and what we think that next evolution will be. And I suppose that the kind of first question really goes to you, Jeff, in as much as in your observations at this point, I think you will have probably seen the most of that evolution for transmedia. But where do you think the future of transmedia is headed at this point?
Well, Tanya, you're correct. In the past 5 or 7 years, it is like night and day. We were really whistling in the graveyard a decade ago, and Marvel is generating movies, streaming series, television series, all of these things interconnected to create these kind of common universes that span an array of different media platforms. There are more and more of these on the rise. We're seeing Star Wars and a lot of these big franchises do that. But I'm particularly intrigued by the growing understanding that that transmedia is signified also not just by the fact that story plays out across different platforms and can be collected, and a story can be kind of collected and enjoyed, and you can immerse yourself in these story worlds. But in the coming months and years, we're going to be able to include what I call this architecture for dialogue. In other words, the audience, the user, the consumer, whatever you want to call this person, is going to be able to participate in more and more immersive ways. Right now, of course, you're participating because you can comment on what it is that you're enjoying through social media. But fairly soon, as exemplified by my colleagues here on this show, there are going to be ways for you to actually enter into the story in some way and participate, or participate creatively by generating content, submitting it, and having it be curated, and perhaps become a part of the canonical story world.
From the perspective of this notion that modern technology is really allowing and facilitating this notion of interaction and, to a certain degree, immersiveness, I'm interested to hear from you, Oliver, in terms of what you think is kind of the next step for filmmaking, because I know that obviously that there are some traditionalist issues when it comes to film development and the scope of immersiveness and interaction that can really occur. What do you think is really the kind of the next step in terms of where we need to go, or what gaps need to be filled in order to allow and facilitate this kind of immersive entertainment to happen?
I mean, I think actually, in a way, from the business side of things, it's a very collaborative industry, and people are always looking for new ways to communicate their stories. Personally speaking, the prospect of working with some of, say, these immersive theatre companies that like the Alice Underground thing, which I went to see last week, and I thought it was fantastic. The prospect of potentially working with them to generate an IP and a storytelling experience together that builds some filmmaking practices into live theatre would be very interesting. But I think it's partly an issue of how common the technology becomes, because at the moment, a lot of this ARG stuff, and in fact, of course, these immersive theatre experiences are still quite a niche thing. They're still quite expensive, both for the consumer and for the businesses that use them or create them. So I think it's going to be partly tied to, as ever, that kind of economical and technological progression of seeing how these technologies develop in terms of mass production and mass consumption.
Absolutely. Sorry guys, I just want to pause for 1 second in time and just clarify who we've got on the call, because my Skype is going a bit bonkers and I'm not sure who we've got going on the call. Jeff, are you still with us?
Sure am.
Wonderful. Sanj, are you still with us?
Yeah.
Charlie, are you actually with us?
Yes, I am. Hi, kia ora.
Wonderful. Charlie, could you do me a favour and just explain to the audience exactly who you are and what you do?
Hi, my name's Charlie McDermott. I'm a creative entrepreneur from New Zealand, and we are making a show that's starting in London called The Generation of Z, which is a live immersive show, which is an hour-long experience where we put the audience straight into a zombie apocalypse. Hi.
And for the record, I'm still washing blood out from various garments of clothing. Thank you so much, Charlie.
Yay. Blood.
I had a lovely Macbeth moment of having to rinse the blood from my hands. But just kind of in following through on what Oliver was saying just now, I'm curious to understand from your perspective. Obviously, Oliver's stance on this is still relatively niche, and to a certain extent that is true in as much as there are certain limitations around what you are able to accomplish with a show of that nature. I'm curious to understand what you think is going to be the kind of the next evolution for immersive theatre in terms of being able to take it beyond the theatrical experience and actually create something that has a longer lifespan or certainly has additional scope, shall we say.
Yeah, I think everything's come full circle, in my opinion. So that the product economy is over, the service economy is over, and now it's all about the experience economy. People want to pay for memories. And it's all come back to me, in my opinion, to everything being about the live, the real. We've seen everything on films. We're quite cynical. Young people are interacting from day dot now. And I truly believe that unless our art emulates that interaction, they won't be the audiences of the future. And I think whoever in the entertainment realm provides a fully immersive experience where the person who's experienced it can add to that and be part of that and participate in that, I think that's where it's heading. And certainly in terms of immersive theatre being a buzzword, absolutely, it is quite new, and to try and make it commercially viable, let alone economically viable, is a big challenge. And I guess where we've come from with our investors, who are quite big players out there, Andy Harries from Left Bank Pictures, who made The Queen and won an Academy Award for that, and William Burdett Coutts, who's quite experienced in Edinburgh Fringe and here at the Riverside. We have to look at other ways that we can generate revenue in order to keep the experience with limited numbers and as immersive as we can make it. So that means you're either going to have a cheaper ticket price and run for longer, or you decrease numbers and try and build up your audience and build up the experience so that they will pay more for a ticket. But where we come in, we've got a graphic novel coming, a teen fiction novel. We've got an interactive augmented reality strategy board game coming. Obviously, there's a screen option that we're working on that will have choices involved in the narrative, because that's kind of our point of difference, I guess, is that we do choices in the show. So there are sort of 16 different ways you can experience the show. And yeah, I think in order to make it economically work, you just have to have ancillary products. So there's a lot of merch that's coming, and Jeff will speak to this as well. But it's about the transmedia engagement and engaging people on another level. And if you can get that engagement right, all of a sudden you attract sponsors. So we had GoPro in last night. We're talking with Skype, and for a big, large scale commercial immersive event, you really need those sponsors underpinning some of the capitalization, so that your investment can really go on the bells and whistles. We didn't get to have our man on fire, but one day we'll have a zombie on fire at the beginning. Hopefully in New York next year, Jeff.
All right. Tanya, Charlie is speaking to very good points. I've gotten to do a bit of traveling this past year, and it's fascinating, this kind of live event experiential narrative that's going on everywhere. In Australia, you have these puzzle rooms where groups of people are going into these kind of enclosed apartments or warehouses or manors, and they are trying to quickly solve some kind of mystery or problem. Some of it, very tense and suspenseful with this feeling of danger. You've got to do it within a certain amount of time or you lose. And so there's this kind of cooperative play, which is almost more than role play because you're really there, it's really you, and you've got to get out of the situation. In the Middle East, we're seeing the proliferation of what they're calling theme parks. Now, I used to think when people in the United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia talked about theme parks, I'm imagining some kind of amusement park with rides and roller coasters and things like that. It's not exactly true. These are mostly enclosed spaces where there are activities that you can participate in, some of them utilizing cutting edge virtual reality technology. And the movement of these parks, which are all over the place there, is toward the development of intellectual property, story, so that they can truly be themed. Not all of them can be themed after Marvel or DC superheroes, so now they're going to start inventing new intellectual property that will launch out of these theme parks, become franchises, and enter into the entertainment business across different platforms. Really fascinating new evolution of the multi-platform approach.
And I'm actually really interested in one particular item that Charlie mentioned, which is this notion that we have a generation, if you like, who are very much interested in the notion of experience, of buying memories, if you like. And that is one thing that I think is universal in all of this immersive entertainment that I've kind of been exploring and had a look at, is that there is one unifying trend, and that is the notion that the audience has a bonding experience through the immersive theatre or the immersive entertainment. And as a result, they come out of the other end of that experience with a unique set of memories, a unique bond. It's almost like, you go on a camping trip, or, you've kind of been through the trenches together. It's almost similar to the mentality of a gaming audience. When a gaming audience goes through a quest together, they come out of the other end of that quest having formed unique bonds of solidarity and experience, and there's a certain degree of trust that's been built as a result of that experience. And I'm curious to understand whether or not there is any vision from your perspective, Charlie, of really leveraging that unique bond that's being created amongst these audiences. I know that your kind of initial step was to say, what if you want to come back and be a zombie, sign up and volunteer and be a zombie. But beyond that, what is the scope of leveraging that unique bond that is being formed by these audiences in an age where the millennial, user is very much connected, beyond their own friendship circle into a social sphere and a digital sphere that could really offer up some interesting opportunities? I'm curious as to what you think that next step might be.
Yeah, well said. Absolutely. We work very much from a notion of whānau, which is a Māori word who are the native peoples of my land, which just means family and community. So the idea around getting people back to come and be the zombies and be the makeup artists is trying to expand that idea of that collective experience. And you hit the nail on the head. People come along to the show and they are cast as survivors and they survive together. We have people very cynical come to our sales, really cynical, but you got me. I found something in myself when I was running through with my children that I did not know existed in myself. And that for us is a true fan. And I guess not everyone's going to be a true fan, but the deeper we can engage with them across multiple platforms after the show, before the show, during the show, it creates a much deeper experience for us to move forward with creating a global fan base who really care about what we're doing. And so we'll go out and buy those products or engage with those things. We are working with a Kiwi company called Immersive, who work they geospatially map areas using the cloud. So we do a whole lot of live augmented, I call it mixed reality, because it's not just enough to have any augmented reality. There always has to be, for me, a live component and a story component, and to me that's human. So we've done events before at big music festivals where Pearl Jam were headlining, where Pearl Jam's roadie's gone missing. You've got to find him, and there are 10 interactive stations dotted out throughout the festival that you overcome a challenge at each one with the app and with some live actors, and that gets you on to the next one, and there's sort of a prize to meet Pearl Jam at the end. And that went really, really well. We also did that in Christchurch, where the earthquakes had devastated the city, and in the red zone we did a similar event with the Christchurch City Council. But taking that to its furthest, or what we're working on at the moment is literally having an ingress type game where it's all proximity based, but instead of taking over buildings or landmarks, it'll simply be you either can infect people or cure them. And it becomes much more about, oh, you've been to that show, you've got the app, you're playing the game, and I can see who's infected. I can see who in the area is playing the game. And much like Ingress, those AR games, it'll be, but it's more about interpersonal. So hopefully what we would be doing is, instead of them interacting or helping each other to interact with a building, they're actually interacting with each other, so they can see who's infected or not, almost like a giant game of, freeze tag. In terms of like a live experience where it's fully integrated with some sort of augmented technology, to me, putting on these cumbersome glasses is just naff, and no one wants to really do it yet. And I think we just need to wait until the technology, which is coming, there's a big race on at the moment. Everyone's working on the hardware, Oculus Rift, Google Glass, but there are some guys who are working on a technology that will be into market in the next 18 months that maps your face and actually can project 3D images straight onto your eyeballs, not even kind of, I guess, removing the need for these cumbersome glasses or, phones or whatever. And I think once that happens and it's embedded in real life, I think in 3 to 5 years' time, it's coming. And I think our entertainment, we're trying to pioneer a new form of entertainment, essentially by adding all of these things together in a new context. That side of it is really big. And I think, sorry, there's my ramble on that one.
I wanted to touch on the point that you raised, which I thought was an excellent one, about the fact that what Transmedia and these kind of live experience kind of venues are offering is this air of commonality, this air of almost tribalism. We're into the same thing. We love it, and therefore we are connected to each other around it. One of the most difficult things that we've had to do with Starlight Runner's clients is to try and convince our clients, these movie studios or brands, big companies, to embrace their fandom, to actually own the venue in which the fandom can express itself. We asked them, wouldn't you want to be the place or take some ownership in the place where everyone can come and express themselves about your intellectual property, your story world? And they go, well, no, we don't want to do that because it's dangerous. They might say something bad about us on our own turf. There could be some negativity. You have to be careful with fans and so forth. And I think that they're missing a vital component when they don't do that. We've seen with people like the Xbox group over at Microsoft create fan communities out of things like Waypoint for Halo, where fans can gather, communicate with one another, bond, and absorb more information about their favorite story world. And that enables Microsoft to kind of keep tabs on these participants and maximize their potential, both in terms of giving them the best possible experience they can have, but also, of course, in being able to track what it is that they like or don't like, and advertise to them and communicate with them most effectively. It's still tough to get companies to embrace this dialogue and to take ownership of these communities.
I tend to agree to a certain extent, but I think perhaps Oliver, you have a point of view on this. But I do think that there is an understanding, amongst the studios that actually there is a need to engage with the audiences in the fandom and to create some structure around that. And obviously people like Disney, specifically with Marvel and Star Wars, are getting to a stage where they do genuinely want to have a partnership and a collaboration with those audiences. What would be your sense of that, Oliver, in terms of film development?
Well, I think Jeff certainly got a point though, because it's I think there's a certain lack of willingness, or no, that's wrong, not a lack of willingness, but a lack of understanding of the kind of interplay of control that you now have between your audience and say the producers say, and I think what's where it's going to start to really kick in, and where I think hopefully there's going to be a kind of mutual meeting point, comes from as these, say, if we're taking immersive experiences, where though they and then the sort of major tenets of, say, film begin to overlap, and what I guess I mean by that is that at the moment, it's a relatively sparse area of the entertainment market. It's popping up, as we're saying, like all over the world, and in London, there's probably 3, 4, 5, maybe this year there'll be half a dozen kind of big immersive shows each year, but they're still quite expensive. And at the moment, they're able to occupy different territories. So I went to Alice Underground. I'm very keen to come and see Charlie's thing, Generation Z. I was looking at it before, and it looks amazing. But they're occupying different genres, if you like, or different, or they're engaging different kinds of audiences in terms of their aesthetic or the story or the type of experience. Whether it's a zombie apocalypse or it's Alice in Wonderland. There's potentially different people going to see that. As that market becomes a bit more crowded and there's more and more and more immersive experiences, and I do feel like a bit of a Luddite in this conversation with all these people doing such amazing and sophisticated and kind of edge of tomorrow things. But what I would imagine, and this might just be my own bias, is that as that market becomes more crowded, it will be the experiences that, on top of being the best Alice in Wonderland experience you've ever seen, or the best bank heist experience you've ever been to, that have the best stories, and the ones that resonate with something very fundamental in their audiences. And I guess a good example of this might be, as maybe we've discussed before, I'm beginning to forget, but
we've covered all this ground before.
But The Last of Us, stood out as a video game so strongly on the basis of its story, even though its gameplay wasn't particularly out there, wasn't anything that people had necessarily not played before. It was a beautifully cohesive world that they built, but it was also an extremely compelling story, and that alone was enough to make it really, really stand out.
Amazing game.
Amazing game.
Amazing.
All right, guys. All right, boys. Enough.
Let's just geek out. Come on, let's just do it.
Okay, so I suppose this is more of a statement than necessarily a question, but I once had an interesting conversation with a very good friend of mine who is a futurologist at one of the Rain Dance film panels for the film festival, and this question came up about privacy, and he had this really interesting take on privacy, which was that people kind of are very reticent at the moment. They're very protective of their privacy, but the reality is, in 10 years' time or 20 years' time, privacy will no longer be an issue, because what we're doing is we're essentially cultivating a generation of users who do not understand the concept of privacy, because we walk around with devices in our pocket that already give all of our personal information to big networks or data houses of where we've been, how fast we're walking, what our pulse is, what shops we're visiting, all this information that essentially tells the story of us. And I want to take that kind of hypothesis and apply that to the notion of transmedia and immersive entertainment. In as much as I think we're getting to that stage where we at the moment it feels very niche. At the moment it feels like something that is slightly uncomfortable for us to necessarily think will become something that is mainstream. But as Charlie was kind of saying earlier, and certainly with the nature of audiences today, I think we're going to get to that stage where actually in 5 or 10 years' time we're going to look back on this and we'll just have evolved into immersive entertainment, into this notion that actually it's completely normal to want to physically engage with something, or to be standing in a spot and want to pull out a device of some sort that's going to engage us in a physical way rather than a digital way. With the environment around us, whether that's through the Internet of Everything or whatever the new next generation technology might be. I do feel like there is going to be that kind of moment when we just realise that actually immersive entertainment is already around us. That's just my 2 cents worth. I'm just throwing that into the pot. But Sandra, I'm curious to hear your point of view, because Charlie was talking about this notion of technology facilitating this notion of immersive entertainment, and he spoke very briefly about things like headsets and what have you, and when we remove the awkwardness of things like headsets, that we will find that there is a step forward in immersive entertainment. And I'm curious to hear from your perspective. Obviously you've toyed around with things like holograms and virtual reality and augmented reality, but what do you think is the next technology that really is going to make that difference, or where do you see this roadmap kind of going?
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting question, and there's been some really interesting views expressed so far. I mean, from my point of view, I'm kind of, the issue we have at the moment with technology is that it's a very financial buoyant place at the moment. And what I mean by that is that there's a lot of investment. There's a lot of people that are coming up with ideas. They're going to Silicon Valley or Silicon Roundabout or Israel or whatever, and they're like, "Hey, I've got this fantastic idea. Give me $1 billion or give me $1 million or something like that." And that's great, because there's lots of these really cool concepts, and loads of money's been swapped, and people are starting to invest in development of these cool ideas. The only issue we're having at the moment, and this kind of goes back to what Oliver was saying, is that even though there's some fantastic ideas, there's no fantastic narrative. Yes, there's Oculus Rift, but a lot of the stuff on Oculus Rift at the moment is pretty shit. Yes, there's Microsoft HoloLens, but at the moment the kind of uses of it at the moment haven't really been completely exciting. Yes, there's been Google Glass, which to be honest, before I tried Google Glass, I thought it was really crap. But when I actually put it on, I actually realised that there's some fantastic technology that's being developed at the moment, and it's useful. And so yeah, I'm just going back to what Oliver was saying. It's all about the narrative. You can have the best, bit of kit in the world. It can be all singing, all dancing, do everything you want it to do. But if you haven't got a good story, it's just something that the investors are going to get bored with and move on to something else. And that's the problem I feel we have with technology at the moment.
So do you think that, and Jeff, I suppose this one is kind of for you as well, do you think that there is still a lack of understanding in terms of how to leverage the technology from a transmedia perspective? Because one thing I tend to find is that there does seem to be almost a kind of implausibility in the type of technology that's being utilised to try and tell a transmedia story or augment a transmedia story. And oftentimes what we see certainly is, with things like the Oculus Rift, as Sandra was mentioning there, is they tend to be a little bit superfluous to needs. They tend to be there to be flashy and be the cool factor and the stupid geeky thing we put in our head, but it doesn't necessarily add or enhance the story itself. And do we feel that there's still maybe a disconnect in terms of what kind of technology is being thrown into the ring when it comes to transmedia development?
Again, Tanya, I think that's very perceptive. I've had the good fortune to work pretty extensively with James Cameron, and Cameron, of course, is a great lover of technology and staying on the vanguard of technological development. But if you think about the way that James Cameron approaches new technologies, they are in service to a narrative vision. So the motion capture technology, the 3D technology that he developed, even the technology, the submarine technology that he used to get to Titanic, were built because he was in pursuit of a vision, a narrative vision. He needed to tell a story so badly that he had to invent the devices that would be necessary to allow for a mass audience to experience the story. That hasn't happened with virtual reality, I feel, because the group that has risen around the world that is pouring money into these devices. They were the ones in some way who were jilted in the 90s with VRML. They were the ones who perhaps almost made it but didn't quite back then, and want to have a second go at it now that technology has evolved. Either those people are at it, or people who would have fantasized about it and wanted it back then and couldn't have it. They're of age now. They've got the money. They're investing into it. So it's not necessarily in service to a narrative. It's creating a technology and then hoping a great narrative gets poured into it by creators. And that hasn't quite happened yet. I'm hoping it will. But I think, again, the gentlemen on this call are correct when they say it's going to take a fantastic storyteller who understands that a new language needs to be developed that's going to work for the consumer. And we are not going to mass produce this unless we get those big, heavy devices off our heads.
I tend to agree in as much as I do think we need to find a way to make the technology transparent. And I think until the experience is intuitive and fluid, we will continue to run into this kind of a problem. But guys, I want to thank you all very much for your time. We've managed to go hugely over time. Before we all disappear, I will just ask you very, very briefly to just shout out for me your Twitter handle or your URL, or however you would like the audience to be able to follow you. If we start out with Oliver.
It's at Oliver Kassman, Kassman. I also just want to shout out for Crimson Peak, but that's it.
And Sanj?
Yeah, it's just at Sanj Surati, so SanjSurati. And also a big shout out to Halishin, which is the company I work for.
Wonderful. And Charlie?
You can find me through www.thegenerationofz.com or www.gamechangeproductions.co.nz.
Okay, and Jeff?
You can reach me through Twitter at Jeff_Gomez. Remember the underscore, the other Jeff Gomez, he gets really pissed off. Gomez. And on Facebook at Starlight Runner Entertainment.
As always, these conversations are very interesting, and sometimes they do go over our half-hour limit. In this instance, the session did go somewhat over, so we've divided it up into 2 sessions. You can catch the rest of this conversation next week. In the meantime, if you're interested in subscribing, then don't forget to look us up at digitaljamsessions.com or go and check us out on iTunes. Thanks again for listening. digitaljamsessions.com